Well, Matt, here we are again. Let's have a look. Sometime this morning I caught up with you to ask you for your views on what's going to come out of the OECD today on the digitalisation of the economy and tax proposals for handling that. So the report's just come out.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm wondering, have you had a chance to absorb it? And if so, what's in it?
I have. I mean, it seems like only a few minutes ago we were just sort of crystal ball gazing in terms of what's going to be in the paper. So it's great to have seen it, and we had the webcast as well around the issue of the paper. So the OECD's confirmed we're on for a Paris consultation next month, which is going to be great. And interestingly, the paper as well confirms there'll be a second consultation later in the year around Pillar 2. So I think, as we'd sort of assumed, this is focused on Pillar 1. I mean, my immediate reactions from reading it are, I think it's fair to say that it's tried to borrow from the common features of the proposals we've seen so far. So definitely there's a desire to allocate more residual profit, or some more residual profit, into market jurisdictions. The use of sort of agreed fractions as a simplification measure is definitely in there quite heavily. You know, this is the way that we can agree this quickly and simply to move additional profits in. That's the rationale underpinning a lot of this. And I think the core part of this is really around identifying what they refer to as deemed residual profits, and then pushing a portion of those deemed residual profits into market. And the way that they are approaching this is very much start off with a new taxing right. So I think, as we sort of guessed this morning, there would be some sort of new nexus right, something which gets you away from a bricks and mortar sort of presence. So a new taxing right, and then a new way to allocate profits to that new taxing right. And this profit allocation tree is almost a waterfall. They've turned it ABC, and essentially what A does is starts with your global financials. That's the likely starting point, because that's the sort of the most easy administrable sort of figures to start with. You then will probably have to apply some sort of agreed fractions to strip out returns to more routine functions, and then apply an allocation key, which they're recommending will probably be something like sales, in order to essentially push profits which are attributable to markets into the relevant markets where you generate them from. And then, in addition to that, so that's A of the waterfall, you then have B and C, which deal with sort of fixed returns for marketing and distribution in country, and then anything else that you do above that sort of baseline. And B and C, I think B, they're moving towards as well a bit of a sort of fractions approach, but the paper kind of leaves that open. And C will probably be based on traditional transfer pricing methods. So I think, you know, you sort of look at this and say, actually, the core of the arm's length principle, I think they're trying to preserve intact, but this is something where you have something that goes beyond the arm's length principle in a certain way.
So arm's length plus.
Yes.
So again, I know you've only had a couple of minutes or so to absorb the report. Any unanswered questions in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big two for me, well, let's say three, the big three. The number one is the extent to which this actually, you know, reaches a consensus position by the end of next year, that everybody gets behind this and it reins in all of the unilateral measures that we're seeing beginning to crop up around the globe. We've got a French DST, we've got a UK DST potentially coming next year, Austria looking at one, Czechoslovakia. There are a number of these DSTs which are levied on gross revenues. So this is a profits-based tax that the OECD is recommending. So hopefully this will rein in those gross revenue-based taxes. The other thing for me, the other two things, as I say, is really around the way in which you administer this new rule and the way in which you avoid double tax. The administration piece, I think, is really around what numbers do you really use, where do you get them from, how do you deal with things like regional segmentation, business line segmentation, these new kinds of P&Ls you have to create. And the OECD is saying, let's start with the global consolidated financials. They're the audited figures. They're based on GAAP or IFRS. So that feels right. But as I say, the difficulty there is then when you move into highly integrated businesses that don't segment across different operations, how do you allocate additional tax to different legal entities in the group? that then takes you to double tax relief as well, because once you've used this new taxing right to say, well, X is going to the markets, which company in the group is actually going to pay that, and how does it get double tax relief? So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions still in there. This is an attempt to really try and create a consensus position, but I think it's roll on Paris, and we'll see sort of what happens there.
So that's interesting. So we've got like arm's length plus, if you will, but then the actual mechanics, if this proceeds, of how do you actually accomplish this?
Yeah.
Just a lot of stuff to go to work through still. What happens next?
So Paris consultation next month, I think 21st, 22nd of November. And obviously the OECD is seeking stakeholder input ahead of time. There's a deadline for providing that, and then they'll be basically taking from the pool of stakeholders who respond. They'll be inviting people to come and present in Paris. Inclusive Framework will be listening to that. There is an impact assessment as well that the OECD has already had, so hopefully we'll get to see that. That'll be shared at some point. And as I say, on to then Pillar 2 in December. And then the aim is still to have a consensus position by the end of next year.
All right, so this is definitely a stay tuned and buckle up type system.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Matt, for your time.
Thank you.